You'd have to go back to 1995 for the last time Birmingham City were playing third tier football. They won the double that season in 94-95, the Auto Windscreen Shield and the Division 2 title under Barry Fry. They've since had an incredible adventure in the Premier League, and then they had over 10 years in the Championship. But after, it was ironic really, because they were fighting relegation for multiple seasons under an ownership regime in Birmingham International Holdings Limited, I think, that were heavily criticised. And the interesting thing is that when Blues fans were most optimistic about new ownership, as the Tom Wagner, the Knighthead Capital takeover gave Blues fans so much hope last summer, it's ironic that it was the 23-24 season in which the B9 outfit finally succumbed to relegation. But it's about bouncing back now. There's been reports of a £20 million budget for new head coach Chris Davis as he looks to implement his progressive ideas in League One. But a few question marks as well, because there's been reports today from Mike Keegan that Birmingham City have asked the EFL, so far being declined, to play their home match against Wrexham in the United States next season. So Knighthead Capital have plenty of ambition on the pitch, but are they owners that are going to respect the identity and the core principles of the fan base and what the club's about? So there's a lot to get into. We're going to discuss all of that and plenty more on this Summer Deep Dive. Yes, welcome along to the latest EFL Debate Summer Deep Dive, one of 72 we're doing across the EFL, club by club, between mid-June and mid-July. Already the full set uploaded for League 2 to YouTube and to Spotify, so go and check those out. Get yourself subscribed. Feel free to comment and drop us a review if you fancy. Once you're done with this one, for now, delighted to be joined by Blues fans Ryan Deeney and by Ben Hawker, aka the Blues Breakdown. Good evening to you, gents. Thank you so much for joining me. Ryan, some positive change, I suppose, in terms of the ownership of the club and what the club's going to be capable of in the long term in terms of results. But relegation last season, where do you feel the club's at right now?
It's a strange sort of situation where we've been relegated. It's long overdue, and yet we go down with a lot of optimism because I think there's a sense of there's a chance to completely refresh things now and start over effectively. For once, for the first time since Chris Hughton was in charge, the aim is actually to push for promotion. For the first time in a long time, we're the biggest fish in the division in terms of not just the size of the club, but also the finances involved and everything that's happening off the field. So yeah, it's a chance to start again, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, what do you make of the ownership group? Because obviously they spoke with a lot of ambition, a lot of clarity, a lot of purpose when they first came in, but they've made a couple of mistakes, haven't they? Because one of them was replacing John Eustace when things were going so well last season and replacing him with Wayne Rooney. So that was one mistake. And then there's also rumours that have just broken out today about the possible playing games in America. Now, we don't know from the club's point of view whether these sort of rumours are accurate, that that's what they want to do. But any concern, perhaps, that the owners aren't so necessarily in touch with the fans?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I think from an internal perspective, as Birmingham City fans, we could probably all agree that the noises that we're hearing from Knighthead and from Tom Wagner are all incredibly positive and, have filled fans alike with great optimism and kind of real vigor for the future. But as you say, I think there's probably a couple of decisions that you would point to. You've mentioned there, obviously, that the sacking of John Eustace when the club were in a lofty position in the table, which I think it's been without treading over old ground too much. Mm-hmm. I think you can debate whether or not the decision to move John Eustace on was the right decision or not. I think a lot of people would probably agree it was more the replacement that was the bigger issue there. And then, with the news breaking this morning, I think it was in the Daily Mail, wasn't it, about the ownership group asking the EFL to play games in America, although I see there's been a subsequent article from the Telegraph almost debunking that, saying that actually there was no official request to the EFL. It was mooted and it was an idea that was kicked around in the boardroom before being basically fairly quickly dismissed. Mm-hmm. So I think, from an internal point of view, I think most Blues fans have got real optimism and real high hopes for what the ownership group can bring. There's probably a little bit of trying to keep a lid on things. I can very well understand why, from an outside perspective, there are a lot of fans of other clubs, and some of it might be born out of jealousy in terms of the budget and the money that the club is spending, and maybe a little bit of naivety as well in terms of, they're looking at those more external decisions. So, the sackings, etc., this type of thing. There's very little being made of, the amount of money that the club are spending on St Andrews at the moment, and all the renovation work going on there, and all of the kind of behind the scenes stuff. So, I'm filled with optimism, and I think they are a breath of fresh air. But as with everything, proof's in the pudding. They're delivering off the field. We now need to see a delivering on the field.
Yeah, I think that's more than fair. And somebody who's going to be key to delivering on the field, Ryan, is the new head coach, Chris Davis. There's always going to be the perception of a risk going for a first-time manager who's relying on his coaching background, but for a team that's going to be expected to play on the front foot and to be possession dominant in a lot of games next season, do you see a good fit in terms of going straight into League One, the short-term aspect of that, because of the financial resources that Birmingham are going to have?
I think there's a lot of managers that will go into first-time jobs, and pretty much every managerial, or certainly the majority of managerial appointments, will be in a situation where a club is in a difficult situation. For the most part, a club is fighting in their objectives and their change manager. It's very rare for a football club to be out, or for a manager to be able to be appointed by a football club with, for the most part, a fresh slate, with the owners very much willing to back them, with the fan base ready to get behind them. Mm-hmm. The aim firmly being promotion, to have a full pre-season and effectively mould exactly what you want to be able to push that high up the table. There are very, seemingly from the outside, I'm sure there will be internally and obviously those sort of discussions, but there doesn't seem to be an awful lot holding Davis back in regards to him being able to come in and do what he wants to do. Even to the point that he is manager, he's not a head coach. He's going to have responsibility for recruitment and those sorts of things too. So he has this summer now to be able to mould Birmingham City Football Club and the football team into what he wants that to look like. In terms of whether it's the right appointment, proof is in the pudding. We genuinely don't know. We can only listen to the snippets of his interviews. We can only read the what the club announcements say and how people sort of feel about him and what other people talk about him. But the signs are all very positive. I think what was always probably going to get this summer was either a fairly pragmatic appointment in regards to names such as Alex Neil and Paul Heckingbottom were thrown out, where you kind of think, they know the level, they'll probably get the job done. Where do we go from there? We don't know. Or you take any appointment this summer would have been a risk given the scale of the job at hand, which I'm sure we'll probably go into. But bringing in a younger coach probably provides that element of maybe there's a lower ceiling in terms of if it goes wrong, it might really derail. But actually, a lower floor, I should say, sorry. But the ceiling is a lot higher. We've seen what can happen. Kieran McKenna's the obvious one, but we've seen similar situations where if a new and fresh voice comes in and they hit the ground running, then the world's your oyster. You can go as far as you want, and with the club's ability to back whoever's in the hot seat now at Birmingham City, Davis has got a prime opportunity to be able to develop not only the football club but also his own managerial career, and there should be benefits to everybody involved in theory if this goes well.
Ben, Ryan mentioned Kieran McKenna there as an example of how first-time managers can be successful, but he also mentioned that he's going to be very much a manager rather than a head coach and have quite a lot of control over the recruitment. And I'm just wondering, McKenna, when he was in Ipswich, went into a very good operational structure. I think the takeover at Ipswich had happened about a year before McKenna came in, so structurally they were in a very good place for McKenna to slot into. I suppose what I'm questioning with Birmingham is, just because we know Chris Davis is a very good coach based on his career, does that mean that he's going to be very good at recruitment? Because those are very different skills.
I think anything regarding Chris Davis at the moment is a little bit of an unknown, other than potentially, what he'll bring out, what he'll bring to the club in terms of a coaching aspect. Which I think has been fairly well documented during his time as assistants around various different clubs. I think there are a lot of parallels between ourselves and Ipswich in terms of recent takeover, relegation into League One, wanting to bounce back. Are we where Ipswich were when McKenna took over in terms of structurally behind the scenes? Possibly not. But I would suggest that we probably have a greater financial backing potentially than Ipswich had at the time. And I think that Knighthead and Tom Wagner and Gary Cook, etc., will give Chris Davis all of the available tools and resources that they can possibly offer to make his time a success. There's, in terms of recruitment, I think, I don't know, has it been officially announced that Frank McParland's left? I think it's fairly well known that he is or has left the club. So there'll be a slight restructure in that regard. But as you say, Davis is coming in as a manager rather than a head coach, which I think is a bit of a step change from what was.
Do you know what? That caught me out, actually. I almost assumed that it would be a head coach, so it caught me out a bit. But it's actually, yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, forgive me if I'm wrong, but Tony Mowbray came in with the title of manager as well.
Rooney and Mowbray.
And Rooney as well. Okay.
It seemed to be that once Eustace left, they were just going to hand the reins to whoever was put in the hot seat, and Rooney was the first one. Obviously, that was a disaster that we don't want to talk about anymore. And then Mowbray had a similar role, which is why we saw the recruitment we did in January, really.
I mean, Craig Gardner's still technical director, right? Bit of faith waning in Craig Gardner, despite his previously legendary status at Blues for the goals against West Ham and all the rest of it.
It always becomes a difficult thing because you never know exactly how much influence certain individuals are having on the makeup of the squad and the club. And you hear little snippets here and there, and you can never be entirely sure what's true and what's not. So while we may have opinions formed, sort of going public with those views is quite tricky in respects of we might have heard one thing from elsewhere and maybe that won't be true, and you're kind of making judgments on things that you've may not necessarily be true. I think the only thing we can look at is that when it came to last summer, there was clearly issues between sort of what Eustace wanted, what Gardner brought in, questions around maybe the timing of a lot of those signings, whether that was, again, you could probably look towards the timing of the ownership and the announcement there, with regards to why certain transfers maybe came a little bit later, because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, was it sort of mid-June, late June that the takeover was complete last year?
Yeah, I think so.
Or sort of made official. So again, you're behind the curve with regards to that. And then I suppose you can only look at the recruitment, and when you look at the way things formed last year, the way that Eustace was dismissed, the way that the squad never really recovered, the way we sort of lacked, the things that people want to see, particularly around sort of, an inner city football club, which is leadership and that sort of passion, for lack of a better word. And we lacked a lot of those things. We lacked reliability, we lacked robustness. So we didn't really get off to the right start last summer. And again, it depends how much of that you put down to Gardner as a technical director, how much you put that down to maybe Frank McParland as a head of recruitment, John Parks a chief scout, who I believe is also gone now.
Joe Carnell.
Yeah, I think, so it depends who's sort of making these decisions. I think the only thing we kind of know is that John Eustace had very, very little say last summer, whereas Tony Mowbray had a say in January. And again, it looks pretty silly. This is why the season goes on. You go, you should have brought a centre half in, you should have brought a goalkeeper in, should have brought a striker in. But Tony Mowbray brought 3 midfielders in, and for the most part, it transformed us for all of about 3 games once those guys came into the side. And then, Mowbray's gone, and all of a sudden you're going back and going, well, where's the structure of the team again? And it just depends on who. Sorry, my partners are trying to get headphones. I don't know where they are.
I'll tell you what, I'll come to you then,
yeah,
Ben.
Give me a sec.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think what's really interesting to me, just looking at the squad in front of me, Ben, I see at least 11 top-end League One players right there. But I guess not necessarily 11 all in the positions that would make an 11. So it's a little bit imbalanced. But I guess the striker position is going to be the main one because, with all respect to Ben Beresford and Dixon, they're probably not quite going to be ready to start regularly for the first team. So definitely a couple of strikers required.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, there's, as you say, on paper at the moment, the Blue squad is very, very strong for this division. As you say, there's probably a couple of positions where you'd say we have some of the top 5 players in the division in those positions, and then obviously there's obviously some huge gaps. And just kind of going back to Ryan's point around the recruitment, I think I think we've seen it over recent seasons. I think you have to judge the recruitment at the end of the window, and then almost 10-15 games into the season.
Fans can't wait for 10-15 games. Ben,
no, I know that, and it's it's particularly the kind of stuff that I do as well. It's hard not to get excited and overanalyze single signings. But I think if last year showed us anything, there were lots of Birmingham fans and there were lots of fans of other rival teams saying that Blues had won the window. That was the best business that was done by Blues last summer. And on paper, if you look at the players, it may be, but what you don't see when they're signing is, what's the character like? What are they going to be doing when the chips are down? And I think, as Ryan alluded to, that was missing, I think, from a lot of those signings. And then you have to look at the availability, the injury records, and things like that. So I think we've got to be patient. I think we've got to get some of the right sort of characters through the door. If those can come in a bit earlier and set the tone going into pre-season, the expectations, these guys might not be playing 30, 40 games in the season, but they're probably going to be just as important as those guys who may come a little bit later in the window.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to start with the goalkeeping situation, Ryan. Ryan Alsop, it looks like John Ruddy hasn't accepted yet the offer that Blues made to him, and with 6 days to go until his, maybe more, until his contract officially terminates, it's looking likely that he's going to go. So at the moment, it's Ryan Alsop that's signed. Mayo is a sort of young goalkeeper. He's probably not going to get any minutes this season, but Alsop sort of doesn't have like the most attractive background for a key position that needs strengthening. I mean, do you see Alsop being first choice? Do you think another goalkeeper's got to come in? How do you see it playing out?
I've got to say, I expect Alsop to be first choice. I know there's talk of us bringing in another goalkeeper that'll be of a similar level, and it'll be sort of 2 number ones, if you like, which is always the line clubs like to pull, isn't it? But I think if the rumour is true that come out today and we've spent, up to £1 million on signing Alsop, which is probably all watering money at League One level, and yet to us it sort of feels like a bit of a, I'd expect him to be the number one, particularly where he was last season, particularly with his experience around playing for clubs that try and play the sort of more progressive style in, working under Rooney at Derby and then working under Rossini at Hull. I think one of the things I've said previously is we've discussed the fact that, our starting 11 on paper at the moment is fantastic, with the exception of us not really having a goalkeeper or striker until the signing of Alsop.
Or a centre half, you could argue. But in terms of
Chris Davis is going to come in and he's going to want to hit the ground running in pre-season because he needs to. Because by the time the new season starts, he needs to know that he's got a team that's ready to go out and win football matches as soon as possible. Because the aim is promotion, and you've got to try and get as many points on the board as quick as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So bringing in a goalkeeper, not just a goalkeeper, but a goalkeeper who knows how to play the sort of progressive style of football, who can sweep, who can play on the ground, who I suppose has an enormous kick on him as well, which I believe is correct. And having someone who seems to be a really good character and a well-liked sort of individual too. So, Gareth Ainsworth thought very highly of him at Wickham. Rooney obviously had a lot of respect for him at Derby. Rossini, a lot of respect for him at Hull. So it seems like he's a really good character as well. And I think when you've got somebody like that coming through the door to help a new manager, and a particularly inexperienced manager as well, set the tone for his squad in terms of what he wants, particularly when Davies talks about being a pragmatist, and therefore the chances are he's going to start from that base and make sure that the defensive side of the team is solid, but also playing in a way that allows the team to progress up the pitch. I think Allsop proves to be a really important sign. It wouldn't surprise me if he starts the season as number one, just on account of the reliability, the experience, the qualities that he seemingly does bring, and that character as well, where straight away he's going to have a bond with the defence that if we keep the bodies we're going to keep, you would expect that Ethan Laird, Dion Sanderson, Lee Buchanan, and if he remains at centre half, which I've got a feeling he might do, Christian Bielik, I don't think you're going to find a better back four in the division. So to have the goalkeeper and that back four available already is such a strong start, such a strong place to start from. And I know there's sort of queries around the amount of money we may have spent on Allsop if the noise is true. But I think when you've got effectively we're going to be signing maybe 3-4 players to improve that first 11 straight from the off. So if we've got the budget that we've got available, and it means you've maybe got to pay slightly over the odds to get the goalkeeper in that you want to allow you to start building that, then I don't think it's the worst purchase in the world, and don't think it's the worst decision to maybe pay that little bit extra to make sure you've got that body that you need to make sure that structure is right.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Ben, because you've got the only other goalkeeper, as far as I'm aware, the only other goalkeeper you've got on your book on the books is Bradley Mayo, who's very young. I mean, are we looking at sort of trusting Ryan Allsop to start 40-plus league games, and if we need to go for an emergency loan, we will do? Or do you think we will sign another goalkeeper to try and compete with Allsop, possibly a loan or something along those lines? I mean, £1 million, I suppose, is a lot to spend on someone who isn't necessarily going to be first choice in League One.
Yeah, I mean, if those reports are true that we've paid up to £1 million for Ryan Allsop, then I think you can start to infer that he probably is going to be. Well, I mean, I think as things currently stand, he is almost definitely going to be the number one. I would be surprised if we didn't bring in a second keeper, though. I think the second keeper that we bring in would probably be a loanee or somebody from the free market. But I think they would, as Ryan says, I think the official line from the club would be that they would be coming in to challenge for that number one space. I think there's been an article that's put out today to say that we might have some interest in Bailey Peacock-Farrell from Burnley. So I think, that type of, somebody that potentially we could do. But, Ryan Allsop started 40-plus games for whole last season, so I don't think there's any reason why he couldn't do in League One. It was a signing that I wasn't hugely enamoured with on first viewing, if I'm honest. But he fits a very specific profile that I think clearly is going to benefit the club going forward and the way that they want to play. And I think it's probably some of those intangibles that we talked about previously that probably has attracted Blues to Allsop, and the fact that obviously he is a Blues fan himself has probably attracted. Yes, yeah. So Birmingham City fan. So yeah, I think it's one of those where it probably works quite well for both parties.
Yeah. Can I just say, so an experienced Birmingham City fan doesn't always work out as you want it to.
Any experience with that, Ryan, or?
Little bit, little bit.
No.
Formation then, Ryan. I see the common consensus seems to be that the likelier option is 4-2-3-1. I think Ben mentioned it in our group chat that Chris Davis is quite pragmatic, which would suggest 4-2-3-1 over what I had in mind, which was a kind of a box midfield or something along those lines, because I quite like the idea of Christian Bielik, Mark Leonard, if we got him from Brighton, and then Pike and Miyoshi, sort of all interchaining in a box or diamond midfield. But maybe 4-2-3-1 is the safer bet. Do you think that's what we'll see?
I think so, and I think for a couple of reasons. I think firstly, you've got, I mean, whether it is 4-2-3-1 or a slight variation of that, maybe a 4-4-2 or a 4-3-3, just that sort of, somebody dropping off the striker and maybe making it a three midfield. I think for a couple of reasons I've got that in my head. First, Brendan Rodgers tends to use a 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, and Davis has spent a lot of time working under him. Postecoglou went in there as a assistant manager last season, and Postecoglou obviously produced a very fluid 4-2-3-1 style. I also think it's generally seen as though that 4-2-3-1 or maybe that 4-4-2 sort of press and defensive shape is the easiest to coach.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are coming in and as it stands, we've still got a lot of recruitment ahead of us, and we've still got situations whereby our midfield may potentially be ripped apart if James, Bakuna and Pike go as expected. There's also talk Miyoshi could leave as well, but Pritchard could potentially leave. So there's a lot of maybe, we still don't have a striker either. So if you're going into a new club, you want to be able to find a system that I suppose is relatively easier to coach, and obviously put your own stamp on that version. If you've got a 4-2-3-1, it just allows you to keep it relatively simple off the ball potentially, rather than maybe trying to overcomplicate everything and do something that. I mean, one of the big issues that Rooney had last season was that he walked into a setup that was, 4-2-3-1, 4-4-2, and that sort of fairly simplified setup to make sure that we were solid and strong and trying slowly to introduce the better football. And Rooney came in and started introducing, 2-3-5, and the centre midfielders picking up the ball at fullback and having like this line of five at the front. And it was a lot of change straight away. And I think coming
In
into
season
pre-season
as well, which is always such a difficult one to.
and I think Davis coming in and completely ripping the book up, and a big portion of this pre-season isn't just going to be getting tactics right and getting style right. It's going to be about overhauling the culture of the club as well. So that relatively simplified approach, particularly when you've got the back four that you have at the present, if Bielik does play a centre half as we kind of anticipate,
Really,
and having all up there, you've got that structure. You might as well build around that structure and sort of build in front of it. And as you're adding players to that midfield and attack, then probably easier to come in and just simplify the game and allow them to do what they do best within a maybe an in possession structure, perhaps.
Ryan, Bielik at centre half. Then I much prefer Bielik at the base of midfield.
There's two schools of thought with it. One, Bielik is a fantastic defensive midfielder because he's big, he's strong, he reads the game, he's, although he's not the quickest, he does cover across the ground. Whereas when Mowbray came in and tried to introduce a more fluid style of possession, he realised within, I think it was one game, wasn't it, Ben, if I remember correctly? It was one game where he played him in defensive midfield. He'd give the ball away a couple of times and struggled.
Right.
And he put him at centre half and basically said, he's better at centre half for me because he can see the pitch. So if we want to play through the thirds and through midfield, Bielik, there's too much noise around him. Whereas if you play him in centre half, he can open the ball and have the game in front of him, which I think some players need. We had at the time Bielik went to centre half, and then we had Dezal and Pike for the most part playing in centre midfield. And those guys can play on the half turn. They can switch the ball out. They can play the maybe beat a man on the half turn. So that worked really well. Then Rabbit came in, sort of moved him back into the defensive midfield position, and he was brilliant. But we also had no centre halves, and when he went to centre half again, he was fantastic. And for those last 4 games, we conceded once. So
Interesting.
no, either or really. I mean, Bielik in League One, you'd expect to be arguably the best centre half in the division and the best defensive midfielder, and it depends what Chris Davies sort of expects from him, really.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, and I think it almost depends in what sort of system Bielik is playing in, because you're right, Gab, under John Eustace at the beginning of the season, he was absolutely fantastic in that defensive midfield role alongside Ivan Sunjic. But I think a lot of the game again was in front of them and in front of him.
I see, yeah.
Ryan's right. I think when Mowbray came in particular, it became a little bit more obvious that he wasn't as comfortable receiving the ball on the half turn and then turning back out into midfield.
Which is a crucial role for a 6 in a possession system.
Absolutely. And equally, he didn't move the ball overly quickly, then dropping back into centre half. And I also think it probably solves a bit of a problem for the Blues. So at the moment, we're light on centre halves. You've got Dion Sanderson and Christian Bielik. If you play him there, what Bielik offers you as a centre half is he's still absolutely fantastic in the air. His interception play is fantastic as well, but he's also very good on the ball. And we're going to need ball playing centre halves in the style of play that we expect Davis to play. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him kept at centre half, if I'm honest with you. But as Ryan said, he could easily be the best centre back and or defensive midfielder in the division next season.
No, I think you've converted me there, Baith. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Job done. Go home.
Just on over converted Bielik.
So, Ethan Laird then, Ben, how big a season do you think is in store for him?
All depends on how fit Ethan Laird can stay, ultimately. And I think we'll probably say that again in the podcast later on in terms of discussing a few other players. Massively so. He offers Blues real energy, real drive, real pace down that right-hand side. But it is all about keeping him fit. I mean, I can't remember off the top of my head how often he played. I would say he probably played less than 25 games last season, something around that sort of mark. I would be surprised if he played any more than 55-60% of the minutes last season. And I also think it'd be fairly big because the only other recognised right back that we have on the books currently is Josh Williams.
Yeah, I think Byron Pendleton, who's come through the academy, might be able to play right back as well. But again, it'd be too soon for him in terms of regular stats. So yeah, pretty much just Josh Williams.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's probably question marks over where his long-term future lays, whether that's still with Birmingham or whether that's elsewhere. So, depending on whether or not Ethan Laird can be kept fit during the season might depend on what we do with the right back situation. Is it, obviously the club brought in Cody Dramé last year on loan and basically competed. The two of them competed for that spot. Whether or not we go down a similar sort of route again this year, or potentially, if they think that Laird can manage 35-40 games a season, maybe we do promote somebody up and have them cover, or do we sign a centre half potentially that could shuffle across for 5-10 games if required? Bit of an unknown, but in terms of quality, he again don't want to sound overly arrogant, but on paper Ethan Laird should be in the probably top 10, top 5 right backs in the division this season. But it's all about fitness availability for him.
Yeah, I think for me, Ethan Laird will be the best right back in the league when he's fit. That's what I would expect, just because of his quality. I think he's one of the better right backs in the Championship when he's fit. So for me, I think him staying fit would make a huge difference. But Blues also got to be aware of the alternative options if there's a chance he's only able to play 50-60% of the minutes. So Ryan, Dion Sanderson then. I think we'll agree that he's got potential at Championship level. So again, like we've mentioned with Ethan Laird, he has the potential to be one of the best in League One. But there's a few question marks maybe hanging over him off the back of the way last season finished on and off the pitch. You there, right?
You'll have to forgive me. Bear with me a moment, sorry.
Okay, coming to you on this then, Ben. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens. First and foremost, regarding the captaincy situation for Dean Sanderson. So he was the on-field captain last season for Blues. After the kind of incident, the news came out about the drink driving charge. He was promptly had the armband removed from him for I think 4 or 5 games at the end of the season. With lots of fans rightly saying that was the correct decision. So it'll be very, very interesting to see whether or not that is returned to him ahead of the new season, or is it actually an opportunity, given new manager, new slate, etc., that that armband is moved to somebody different, which I wouldn't necessarily be against. Mm-hmm. I think he had a really tough season in general, and I'm not making any excuses for what he did at all, because that's not it's just that's a very stupid mistake from somebody that should know better ultimately. But he started very well again under John Eustace, and then lost his way a little bit through the middle part of the season, and probably never really recovered that sort of form. But as you say, again, he's got the quality to be able to shine in League One, and he should be a very solid Championship centre half. I know there were lots of calls from within the fan base that he should be sacked and he shouldn't play for the club again. I think the club, I don't want to say made a decision, but I don't see that happening, given the fact that he was not removed from the starting 11 for those final 4 or 5 games of the season. I think the writing was on the wall then that there wouldn't be any chance of him not playing for the club ever again, type of thing. So he's one that I would expect to remain at the club. I'd be surprised if there was interest from other clubs, but I guess never say never.
Yeah, for sure. It's I think possibly the circumstances around Dion Sanderson and like you say, the stupid mistakes that he made. One of the consequences of that, and there's many consequences, but one footballing consequence, I suppose, would be it reduces the amount of Championship interest in him. So I would very much imagine that he is in the Birmingham City squad next season. But Ryan, in terms of the alternative centre-backs, we've talked about Christian Bielik, probably is going to play centre-back next season, but the alternative options, all youth products, Leith Farney, Femi Olafinjana and Tommy Fogarty. These are all sort of teenagers, basically. Do you think there's a world where one of those could get the chance to catch the eye in pre-season, and maybe if the next centre-back that comes in a bit late, and that actually works in one of their favours?
Tough one to say, really. I suppose it depends on the nature of how the season goes. I mean, I suppose what you've got in Bielik and Sanderson is relative consistency, and I'd like to think we're going to bring in another centre half who sort of provides those qualities. And then you've also got the alternative option, which is you've got Lee Buchanan, who stepped in the centre half at times last season. Was fantastic there. And it remains to be seen sort of where Chris Davis sees Emmanuel Longella, but there's always the opportunity whereby I wouldn't be surprised to maybe still bring him back up to Ethan Laird, to bring in another centre half, and then maybe potentially utilise Buchanan as sort of a fourth option, knowing that we've got Longella who can provide an option at left back too.
Do you think Buchanan could play left centre back in a 4 as well as it? Because I agree, he can play left centre back in a back 3. Do you think in a 4 that he's going to be commanding enough and be able to do what's required in the air and all that kind of stuff?
He played there a number of times last season, particularly under, I think it was under Mowbray had a spell there. I'll say a number of times. It's not like he played 20 games there, but he stepped in at centre half on a fair few occasions, particularly through the Mowbray and Venus run.
4 games Lee Buchanan had at centre half last season.
I think that was just start as well. There was occasions where he sort of came in during games and actually stepped in at centre half to sort of cover, and he looked pretty comfortable in every game. Like, there wasn't a situation where you looked at him and thought he really looks out of his depth, which, bearing in mind the form he had under Mark Venus too, is probably a credit to him. And I suppose, given the nature of the way we're going to play next season, with regards to, probably not having to defend as much as maybe we probably would have last season, it wouldn't surprise me if we, ideally we have sort of 3 centre halves that are there and ready to play pretty much every game, but that emergency option could actually be Lee Buchanan as that 4th choice option. Again, it remains to be seen. One of the younger lads might step up. The under 21s did fantastically well, and did they? I feel like one of the under 21s or under 18s won their. I know they both reached the national finals. I can't remember which one won and which one didn't. But obviously both setups reached the national finals last season, had really good years. So it wouldn't surprise me if those, young lads. Tommy Fogarty had a good loan at Ebbsfleet, where he got a few games towards the end of the season and learned the professional game. Rico Brown's had a few sort of non-league loans now as well. So whether Davies comes in and decides they're ready for that kind of action remains to be seen.
Well, I think, Ryan, you remember when Wes Harding came into the side? He wasn't used under Steve Cottrell, and then when Gary Monk brought him in, Blues fans were singing he's one of their own, and he wasn't super technical or anything, although he did put in a great cross, I think, in the Fulham win. But it was like he was quick and strong, but he was, I think, that passion and sort of exuberance that he brought just got fans going. And I do think that sometimes you can underestimate the impact that a youngster coming in can sometimes have on the team. And we are going to have a huge budget, and obviously we want to bring in the quality we need. But I also like the idea of promoting a bit of youth as well.
I suppose it depends how many come in as well. I mean, Brandon Keller's just coming back from Ross County, and there's a sense that he could potentially be involved next year. Alfie Chang's coming back from his ACL. I know he's a little bit older now.
Chang did quite well in the 22-23 season, I thought, actually.
Then you've got George Hall, who will hopefully have the breakthrough season he's kind of been threatening for the last couple of years. Obviously, injuries have derailed him slightly, and Ramal Donovan. I realise we're going to get to some of these names. So I suppose it depends how many young lads Davies wants to keep on the periphery of the team as well. It wouldn't surprise me, given he's got a background in development and worked under managers that have been willing to give younger players an opportunity, whether some of those younger defensive players get an opportunity if that chance arises.
So, Ben, Ryan mentioned Emmanuel Longello earlier, and I think there was probably a school of thought in the Championship that he's good. He's great really exciting going forward. You think of that goal against QPR in the 22-23 campaign, so exciting to watch. There's probably a bit of a school of thought that at left back in a back four, he's going to get exposed defensively, perhaps. But is there the possibility that actually in League One, different sort of level, Blue's going to be on the front foot more? He might actually be one of the best left backs in League One because the onus is going to be so much on him providing width and stretching the play.
Longello's a funny one, actually, because I was looking the other day and he actually played a lot more last season than I imagined. I had him down as playing less than 1,000 minutes, way less than that. I think he was almost at 1,600 minutes, which surprised me a little bit. You mentioned the qualities there in terms of what he brings going forward, and the school of thought, I guess, would be that in League One he's going to have to do less defending. So actually, does that benefit him? I feel like even after two seasons now, 2 seasons, with the club, I still need to see some more to be fully aware, I guess, of what Manny Longello can bring to the football club. It'd be interesting to see how he would adapt to a complete change in style as well, in terms of being somebody who potentially might need to take the ball more, to do more with the ball. As you say, a lot of what we've seen when he's been at his best has been running with the ball and making breaks and playing on the counter. So it'd be really interesting to see how he adapts. I think in terms of in terms of squad building for this summer, I don't necessarily see it as a position of real concern. I think it's with Lee Buchanan, if he's still at the football club, will almost definitely be one of the best left backs in the league next season. Probably less exciting going forward, but as Ryan's mentioned, what he offers defensively is outstanding. He was
and also let's not underestimate the defensive part just because we're in League One, because we will need to defend, and also his 1v1 ability, given that counterattacks will possibly be the biggest threat to us given the way we play and how opposing sides will set up against us. His 1v1 ability for defending against counterattack would be hugely valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, he's a fantastic 1v1 defender, and probably one of the more underrated players, I think, in last season, when his performances went a little bit under the radar. But it was not uncommon to see fans of rival clubs kind of saying, Buchanan was excellent today.
Yeah.
For me, it's not a massive area of concern. I think the only reason why we would look to bring somebody in is if one of those two were to leave the football club ultimately. But I'd be absolutely fine and happy with those two going into the season. No real concerns with the left back position.
Great stuff. So central midfield, quite an interesting area, because you mentioned, Ryan, that Brandon Keeler had a positive loan spell at Ross County and could come into the equation. You've got Pike Sung-ho, who I actually thought showed some nice touches in the second half of last season after joining in January. I especially liked his link-up play with Koji Miyoshi. We know Jordan James can play that deeper role, although he did sometimes play more advanced last season. And you've also got Alfie Chang there now. Bielik might be less of a midfield option if we think for this style he's going to play centre half. But already you've got, 4 decent first team options there. Are we looking at one more, do you think, Ryan?
I think we could be looking at a couple, because Jordan James, by all accounts, looks like he'll probably be off. Obviously, he's been linked with a move away for probably the best part of 18 months now. The rumours about him going to Italy don't seem to go away. I don't think playing League One football will necessarily be that detrimental to his Wales spot. Obviously, there is a potential change of manager there now. So, Pek Sung-ho, he's been linked with Blackburn Rovers in the last couple of days. The expectation, again, he's just won his place back for South Korea. So he may want to move on just on account of, or even go away on loan for a season just to make sure that he keeps that place, particularly with the World Cup coming up in 26. There's Juninho Bakuna who could play there, but again, international hopes, and he's a player who, does he want to be playing League One football? Possibly not. He's got a year left on his deal.
I don't think he's above League One, though, because he's got a really high ceiling, but his floor is very low. And I'm not sure he impacted games enough last season to feel like I should be playing above League One.
It depends what Bakuna turns up on any given day, I think. It is either a match winner or he's just one of the most frustrating footballers I think you'll find. He could genuinely, if he put his mind to it, I could genuinely see him playing, if not the top of the Championship, then certainly lower end Premier League.
Really, Juninho Bakuna?
On his day, when things are going right for him and he's taking the mick out of, I've seen him pick the ball up and beat 5 players and have a shot and just waltz past people for fun, but those days are far too inconsistent. And a Premier League footballer's never going to be able to produce the goods once every 10 games. And that's the big issue with him. You're probably never going to get a consistent 46-game season out of him. So can you trust him to play in a team that needs to win every game? No. So it probably seems to be better for all parties if he moves on this summer. That said, if we've got Juninho Bakuna playing in League One, then I'm not going to complain, because if Davies can find a role for him and can find a position that allows him to produce what he produces, then we're laughing. And then obviously you've got Alfie Chang's just coming back from his ACL. He's missed the entirety of last season, and Keller, is brand new to it, so we could actually see a complete change in the middle of midfield. It it all depends on, I suppose, the variables of who stays and who doesn't. And again, the question of Bielik, we're sort of probably expecting to play at centre half, but it is a possibility that Davies decides to play him as a deep midfielder. So again, there's a lot of questions around there, and I don't think we've got many answers at the moment.
Just coming on Bakuna
sure.
there, and I don't disagree in it. I think it's well documented. You only have to ask Huddersfield fans as well to, they'll tell you how inconsistent.
Exactly, that's exactly the same.
Was for them. What I would say is, he offered fantastic versatility last season. Played in a number of different positions and roles. I think, forgive me if I'm wrong. So I think at some point he played in every position other than goalkeeper and centre half. What to say? He's certainly covered. He played in a deeper sitting midfield role. He played in a more attacking midfield role. He played wide. I think he played a little bit up front. He played at right back a little bit. He offered real good versatility, and I actually think that last season was his most consistent season. That's not saying that he was brilliantly consistent every week, because he certainly wasn't, but I think it was probably his most consistent season in a blue shirt, in terms of, I don't think we saw quite those peaks and troughs that we had done in previous seasons, not quite as high and not quite as low. That said, I don't think I would be too disappointed if he was to leave, because again, he always struck me as he was one of the few players that I found last year that would take the game by the scruff of the neck when he felt like it and could make something happen out of nothing. And often that looked like potentially the only way that we would win games at times during the season. I don't necessarily think that's going to be all that necessary, or at least the hope next season is, we're not going to necessarily need to rely on players for moments of magic. So I actually think he would probably find his minutes next season limited. So again, one of those where I think it is probably better for all parties if he did move on. But yeah, I'm not one that I would be booting out of the door, but equally not massively disappointed if he was one that cropped up and said, yeah, he'd left the football club to join probably a lower mid-table championship club.
And Ben, just to get your views on Paik Sung-ho, Ryan mentioned the links with Blackburn Rovers. I personally think he could be one of the best players in League One if he did stay with us. Ryan's nodding there, so agrees with that. What do you think? And do you think the Blues have got a chance of keeping him?
Wonderful player. Really excellent player. I know there'll be certain sections of the fan base again that will say, he didn't do a lot, he didn't affect games. I think he will suit this new system down to the ground. He was wonderful at taking the ball on the half turn. His ball manipulation, the way he
waits, the weighting of those passes as well, the certain subtle things.
Yeah, really lovely pass of the ball, like you say, good distribution, the way to pass, the way he finds space is just brilliant. And I think that will be really crucial. Again, if the season pans out how we think it probably will, in terms of we'll have lots of the ball, and we'll likely have teams that will there'll be certainly some teams that will sit deep against us. I also think there'll be plenty of teams that will probably try and come at us and have a go. I don't think we should be naive enough to sit here and say that every team that we play against next year are going to stick 11 men behind the ball and it's going to be up to us to break us down. I certainly think that there'll be teams that will have a go at us, probably work in our favour. I'd be really disappointed if Peck left, because I think he could be such a crucial player for us next season. But yeah, I get that he has international ambitions that he probably has to think about. It's whether or not, the board and Chris Davies, now that he can come in, can sell him that and say, look, give us 6 months, give us till the January transfer window, and if you still feel like it's necessary, then we'll find you a loan move or something in January. But I'd be very, very excited to see Paik Sung-ho play in League One next season. Very, very excited.
Ryan, my dream midfield combination for Blues would be Mark Leonard on permanent leave from Brighton as our number 6, and then Pike as a kind of roaming playmaker, like a bit of an 8, bringing all those qualities that Ben mentioned there, and then Koji Miyoshi just spinning off opponents and creating something, and
is this going out before the watershed, Gab? this is a bit hot and heavy for pre-watershed.
What does watershed mean?
9 o'clock, we're fine.
Do you ask him what the watershed is, Gab?
What?
On national TV, so where you can't say or show certain things before a certain time because they might be sensitive to the audience that's watching. The way you're describing our midfield, it doesn't work if I have to explain the joke, but the way you're describing our midfield, Gab, is too early for this.
I see. I get you now. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Anyway, right. So Ryan, talk to me about the midfield. I mean, it would be great if we got a really technical 6. Hopefully, someone like Mark Leonard, Pike, and then Miyoshi. That'd be the ideal, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we had a bit of a discussion the other day. Actually, I think the beauty of someone like Peck, if we can keep him, is that he's so versatile that you could probably put him in any role in that midfield, and I think depending on who you sign to play alongside him, I think he's intelligent enough to just go about his business and make the most of that. He was, again, I thought he was excellent when he played alongside Sunyik, and Sunyik was the one sort of sitting deep in a line point to just run off. I thought he was excellent next to Dazal, who's a little less energetic and feisty, but technical and likes to move the ball. Yeah, I suppose really we want some kind of, if Peck is going to stay, then we want some kind of 6 that can sit deep in midfield. I suppose just marshal that area. If you've got someone as good as Peck, you almost want to let them off the leash, which means having somebody that can just patrol that area and just keep the ball moving, position themselves well, which again is possibly something that Bailey could do.
They've got to be press resistant in the 6, though. They've got to be comfortable with a man on their back and then able to turn and get the team playing. I think that's really important. Yeah, so it just depends on, I suppose, the nature of the player we saw. And to be fair, I think Peck would be able to work around that. And I think Davis will be able to, produce a system potentially that makes that work for them. So I think it's hard to really discuss what kind of midfielder we're going to have, whether we're going to go, as Moby would have preferred, with a completely technical midfield, whether Davis wants a bit of grit or whether he wants a bit of height in there, whether he just wants someone who can sit at the base and just keep the ball ticking. So it's kind of difficult to discuss at the moment without having that prior knowledge of what Davis' team looks like. Sure.
We're just kind of making assumptions really based on maybe preconceived ideas of what a 4-2-3-1 sort of looks like.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if we could find our own Rodri who just sits in the middle and never loses the ball and he's always in the right position and maybe adds a few goals, then that'd be nice. But the chances are we're going to be, hopefully bringing in somebody of quality that just provides some balance within the team. And I think Peck will be ideal to provide that balance too. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, Ben, do we think it's a likelihood that if Miyoshi does stay, he'd be used as a number 10, or do you think there's a chance that, given that we don't really have many proven options I suppose we've got Bakuna who can play on the right, even if slightly more often on the left last season. We've got Pritchard there. George Hall can play as a number 10. Tyler Roberts is still on the books. So Ricky Dembele's there. Keshi Anderson. A lot of options in those attacking midfield positions, right?
Yeah, and I think what you've just described there is this, although you've probably got guys like Miyoshi and Dembele that favour particular sides in terms of Miyoshi off the right and Dembele off the left, I don't see any reason. They're all very interchangeable. We've seen Keshi Anderson play on the left. We've seen him play more centrally. We've seen Dembele play off the left and again more centrally. Miyoshi off the right, Hall off the right, and both centrally as well. Again, Bakuna. So plenty of options without any particular any of them particularly favouring one position or the other. Yeah, I mean, I guess what we lack potentially is a direct ball carrier. You know, I'm not thinking about your traditional type of winger, you know, in terms of getting to the byline and getting balls into the box, but in terms of taking a man on and driving forward, I think we probably lack that a little bit. Across most of the pitch, actually, probably a little bit in midfield as well. You know, Jordan James probably is the best in terms of that ball carrying number 8, but and Siriki Dembele is probably the one of those forward options that is most likely to take the ball and drive forward. Although we saw him do less of that as the season went on. But as you say, Koji Miyoshi is probably more comfortable drifting in and playing in the kind of half spaces on the right hand side and getting in more centrally. Likewise, you know, when we see Bakuna play off the right, his starting position is almost in that half channel and then drifts very, very narrow. And then likewise with Keshi Anderson, again, likes to come into those half spaces. So I think if we were going to add anybody into those attacking areas, I'd want probably somebody of a slightly different profile in terms of a genuine ball carrier and somebody that could really drive and push into the opposition half. What I would say in terms of where they play is it'd be really interesting to see what happens with Romain Donovan. Of all of the criticism of Wayne Rooney and what he did and didn't do, was he gave Romain Donovan a decent crack, and I think he certainly showed some promise at first team level. Certainly has at youth team level. I'm not necessarily saying that he's going to play 35, 40 games next season.
I think he could be a regular bench option, Ben, that sort of wild card, pace off the bench, running at people.
I think he stands one of the best shots of the younger players that we've mentioned of making an impact on the first team next season. Alongside, you know, if we're counting George Hall and Alfie Chang in that kind of youth mix as well. And obviously, if he
further along, almost, you
know, and if he stays, you know, I think we've still got to include Jordan James in that, albeit he's a part and parcel. He was a fixture.
Yeah, you don't think of him like that, do you?
Exactly. But I think Romain Donovan could have a real good opportunity, and it's certainly one where we could see him start to pick up some minutes. And you know, I think we've seen him, his favoured position is probably playing off that right hand side. So it'd be really interesting to see what happens with you know, that side in terms of Donovan and Miyoshi, and if he stays, and then likewise on the left hand side, we've seen. I think Keshi Anderson, again, if we can keep him fit this season, will be a very, very underrated player. Knows this division very well. I think he's a very intelligent footballer, but as I say, one that often goes under the radar. I'm really, really pleased that we activated his. The option in his contract to take up an additional year. I think he'll be a good player at this level, and one that will. I think it was a smart choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan, just hearing Ben speak about Miyoshi and Siriki Dembele, in that they're both. I think there's certain differences to their games. I think Miyoshi goes more hell for leather in terms of pressing opponents and can tire himself out maybe towards the end of games, but certainly in the first half of games he's absolutely electric. And then you've got Siriki Dembele, who's this sort of wriggler who can so agile and can get away from people. I think Miyoshi is a bit like that, but he likes to spin and create out of nothing. Those two I think are really exciting. So I almost wonder, you have Miyoshi and Dembele coming in from wide positions into the number 10 spot. So I think that the number 10 that Blues play, if Miyoshi and Dembele play wide, which with their stay and all that kind of thing, I actually think the number 10 should be one that actually really tries to attack goal and press up with the main centre forward to create space for the wide players to come inside, if that's how we look. So I'm wondering about George Hall, because now I don't know quite where he's at from a fitness point of view and from recovery from injury, but I do remember a brief spell where John Eustace went to 4-2-3-1 back end of the 22-23 season. George Hall plays as the number 10 just behind Lukas Jukovic. And I think that sort of catalysed quite a good run of form because George Hall was sort of making those big darts into the goal scoring areas and maybe creating space for other players to cut inside.
I think what we've got in that 10 position at the moment is, particularly if it's plausible that Alex Pritchard departs, you've got George Hall and you've got Tyler Roberts. And I think both of them you would probably class more as second strikers that can support a front man.
Yeah.
Like to get into the box, like to maybe find little pockets and move the feet quick and try and get shots off a goal or slip people in. Robert's probably a little bit cuter given, his natural experience. Whereas Hall, I think, is just. I remember Troy speaking about him. He did an interview. I can't remember who it was. It might have been on the podcast. And I remember him just talking about the fact that he's quick, he's hard working, he scores goals, he tackles, he runs the channels. And he does a bit of everything. And yet it's hard to really nail down exactly what he is on a football pitch. He's just good. And he's really exciting. I said it last season. I think if he got a full run last season under Eustace, he probably would have finished with double figures. And you have to think the same this season. If he can stay fit, which has obviously been the big issue with him, the talent is, frightening. And he's a player that, if you've got him, you've got Tyler Roberts, and you have to assume we're going to add somebody else somewhere. I don't know exactly what that looks like. I suppose one of the issues we have at the moment with that attacking midfield group is that with the exception of Miosha, there isn't much in the way of reliability there. So I'd imagine we're going to add somebody somewhere. But I think, naturally talking about maybe Miyoshi starting on the right and moving inside and linking with Laird, and then you've got Dembele on the left-hand side and maybe Paul in the centre. The base of the team will probably be pretty consistent. That attacking group will chop and change, and, Davies will hopefully find something relatively settled, but they're all going to have a big impact during the season.
Yeah.
And I think part of the fun is why you might decide that maybe a certain three are going to start each game. We're probably going to have 7 or 8 options in those areas where Davies can chop and change and mix things up. Depends on the nature of the game we're playing or whether players need rest. I can't imagine there are going to be many in the division that are going to have the scale of talent that we're going to have. Particularly, he's probably going to have a 6 sort of first team group with the options of Hall and Donovan impressing on that. And it's exciting. It's exciting to realise that that's what we could be watching this season.
Certainly is. But I mean, we've not really touched on Alex Pritchard, but him in League One is always a pretty good thing in terms of creativity. He can obviously play off the left, but I think what you want is for him to get on the ball and have runners either side of him, because when he's got that, he can make things happen. I'm not sure we quite saw the best of him in the second half of last season after joining in January, but I feel like in League One he's got pedigree for that level.
Oh, 100%. Again, probably one of the better. We said it at the top of the show, right? That you could. The Birmingham team on paper at the moment, you're probably looking at multiple players in multiple positions who would probably be in the top 5 or so best players in the division. I think you can put Alex Pritchard in there as well. He certainly showed his quality in this division a couple of seasons ago with Sunderland. He's been a regular in the Championship for a number of years. He's played Premier League football as well. So yeah, on paper, absolutely. And I think we saw glimpses of it in a Birmingham shirt last season, albeit very fleeting. But certainly that cross that he put in from the right hand side half space for Zivkovic to nod home was exquisite. And again, it could be key to unlocking defences in certain games next season. I think the big question mark over Alex Pritchard will be: does he have the appetite to play in League One for a second time in 4 seasons? Because, and also does the change of manager change his situation potentially? I think it's fairly obvious that he was a Tony Mowbray signing.
True.
Had almost zero look in, I think, towards the end of the season once Gary Rowett took temporary charge of the team, and I think he struggled to make the matchday squad, certainly towards the end of the season as well. And then there were some comments from Rowett, without naming particular individuals, that weren't necessarily pulling their weight in training or showing the level of commitment and effort and desire that he required of them. and you kind of see comments like you hear comments like that, and you see the exclusion of Alex Pritchard from matchday squads, and you put two and two together, and you might be somewhere in the right ballpark. But I think it's fairly obvious that there'll be a clean slate from Chris Davis. I think he's already said that he will use the pre-season games, the time they have on the grass together, and the trip to Austria to assess the squad and see where it's at and make some decisions. So I see no reason why, if Pritchard sticks around, he couldn't be a really key piece in the puzzle in that forward line. As Ryan said, I think there'll be a lot of chopping and changing. I think if we can have a settled keeper, 3 out of the back 4 that play, large percentage of the minutes next season, and 1 or 2 midfielders that make up a decent chunk of that as well. So you've got 6 or 7 players that you can rely on to play 70-75% of the season consistently. I think that allows the opportunity then to have some of those more flair players that we've discussed, the Donovans, Miyoshis, Dembele's, Andersons, Pritchards, Halls, etc., to be rotated in that front line.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So expectations then, coming to you on this then, Ryan. Do you think that it's fair for Birmingham City to say top 2 is the expectation rather than the target? Because on the one hand, very easy to say that because the budget, I would imagine, would dwarf pretty much every other team apart from maybe Huddersfield, but certainly the biggest budget and possibly by quite a distance, certainly from most of the other competitors. On the other hand, a lot of unknowns, a bit of a rebuilding stage. There's teams like Bolton that might be in a slightly more advanced place on their trajectory. Are we in danger of setting the expectations too high too soon in terms of top 2? Should we be saying top 6 is the expectation, top 2 is the target? How do you sort of weigh up the expectations at Birmingham City?
I mean, the expectation is absolutely that we win promotion. I don't think anybody at the club would shy away from that. The demand and the expectation from ownership, from fans, from management, from, I'd hope, the players, is that we're a championship club. When hopefully we jump back on this pod in a year's time, we're discussing a team that will be looking to push towards the top of the championship. Or that is the ambition of the football club. I do think there is a sense of there is a lot of work to do. We had 6 managers enter the dugout last season. Over the last decade, we've had, I think it's 18 managers, if you include interims. I think 12 permanent. We had, I think, 16 players come through the door last season and about 13 leave, and we've had another, double figures sort of leave the club this summer potentially. I think once all said and done, and we're going to have another double figures enter the door. The club has been, we finished between 17th and 21st in 8 of the last 10 seasons in the championship. So there is a massive cultural change that needs to occur at the football club. And Davis has not only got to do that, he's got to recruit the players that help change that culture. The people at the top need to support Davis in being able to change that culture. Davis needs to be able to educate the supporters and the players and bring those on board to change that culture. And then we've not only got to talk about doing it and trying to do it, we've got to go out pretty much from the first whistle next season and go and do it. And it's a lot of work to be done in a short amount of time. I think particularly when you look back at the last 3 seasons of promotion winners, and every single one of them started the campaign with a manager that had been employed the previous season. And only one won promotion straight back, which was Paul Warne and Rotherham. So not only have we got a big job to do, and it's quite easy to see that generally, but also, recent seasons have kind of proven that stability and that consistency moving into the new campaign is very important. And we're going to be relying on a lot of the players that have, been part of that relegation, players that need to redevelop relationships with the fans. We've got a new manager coming in that needs to prove that he can, manage a football team. And then we've got all the expectation on top of that and the budget to try and make everything come together within the next few weeks ahead of what is going to be a long, and I don't think the season's going to be as easy as potentially we think it could be. It's not FIFA, it's not Football Manager. We're not just going out and buying all the best players. It's going to be going to have tough moments. I think particularly at the start of the season, whether that's we start the season while I maybe have a little dip, or whether that's we are inconsistent at the start of the season and then find our groove. I think we are going to have a little dip somewhere, and it's about how we respond to that and push forward. And if we are very much in and around it, if we haven't, done what we all hope, which is just storm the league and run off with it and, say goodbye to everybody else, come January, hopefully we can see what we've done well, what we've done wrong, recruit again and go again, and really kick on the second half of the season.
Let's hope that's the case. Ben, I'm going to throw a hypothetical scenario to you. Let's say Blues get to 90 points this season. Cultural and stylistic change executed very successfully. But there's two other teams who get more than 90 points, and Blues lose by some sort of smash and grab in the final 1-0 to someone else. Would you call it a failure of a season, or would you still say because Blues haven't met the expectation of winning promotion, or would you still say Blues can do all those things and get to a good points tally and have a good season or a decent season without actually winning promotion?
Wow, that is some hypothetical question there, Gab. I think if there's a stylistic change, a tangible stylistic change in terms of the football style, that's a positive and a big tick in the box. I think the football that's been on offer largely over the last 10 years or so has not been enjoyable or anything to watch for fans. So I think that would be a big tick in the box. Not being promoted obviously would be a disappointment. I think Ryan is absolutely right that I think the expectation would be promotion back. I think it would kind of come down to how have we found ourselves in a position where we've just missed out on the playoffs? Is it that we've bottled games? Is it that we've when the big moments have come that we've let them slip, or is it actually that we've just been outplayed by better teams and things like that? Because I think if it's the former, we've in big moments we've really kind of just wilted under the pressure. That's disappointing because that's where we've been for the last 10 years or so, although you could argue that actually when the pressure has really been on in terms of those final day relegation battles, the players have turned up, but largely that's where we've not been very, very good for a long period of time now. So I think if things have if that's how we've ended up in a position whereby we've missed out on the playoffs, then I would possibly say that that is a bit of a failure of the season, because we're probably not quite far along the journey as we potentially thought. If it's just a case of there's been two better teams and things have gone against us and bits like that, and you can see some real tangible differences both in terms of the character of the side, the mentality of the team, and the playing style, then I wouldn't put it down as a complete failure. I think what would be disappointing is if we went through all of that and we'd seen Davis make tangible differences to then leave the football club. I think that would be a real setback. This is obviously all hypothetical and a long way in the future, but I think that would be a real setback.
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait and see. I think certainly it's very much the focus is on promotion. Hopefully Blues can deliver that. With that in mind, Ryan, I'm coming to you on big reasons to believe, to condense everything we've talked about in this podcast so far. What for you would be the big reason to believe Blues can meet their ambition this season and get promoted?
Because of the ambition of the owner. Despite everything that happened last season, there is still a huge wave of positivity around the football club. Season ticket sales are going really well. We've got borderline a top 6 championship budget playing in League One. We've got a manager who has pretty much spent 20 years preparing for this and has been in really strong positions to be able to prepare for this. We had a full interview process. We haven't just, brought in someone's mate to come and manage the football club. And people are still looking towards the future as well and seeing, so much good, that the owners are going to bring towards the city. The potential new stadium and stuff like that. So there is every reason to believe that effectively there are no excuses for why we can't get the job done this season. We can look at reasons why there might be difficulties, but the reality is there are no reasons why there can be no excuses for us not getting the job done this season. Everything is there. The foundations are now there off the field. It's just all about putting things together on the field and people in the positions with the power to do something, doing the job they've been brought in to do, which is recruit well, change the culture and start winning football matches and bring fans on the journey with them.
Absolutely. Ben, what would be your reasons for doubt?
There are none. We're going up 105
Yeah, I mean,
points.
I genuinely, I try to be a very positive person. And hopefully
That's these questions the wrong way around.
Yeah. Reasons for doubt. I mean, we've hired a manager who's never managed to, he's never been a number one before. I think there's always a bit of a question mark over that, albeit,
Sure.
all of the noises that are coming out in terms of what he's saying and the kind of endorsements that he's had from other people are really positive. Again, people will point to some of the decisions that the ownership group have made thus far and and last season, and there is a little part of me that hopes that, and I don't trying to phrase this in the right way without sounding negative. I hope that we're not talking about a decision that the ownership have made at some point during the season in a light that is not positive, because as I say, they've done so much fantastic work for the club off the field. We're yet to see real positivity on the field, albeit I think the appointment of Tony Mowbray was fantastic, and I still genuinely believe that had Mowbray not fallen ill, and wish that he is still in a place of recovery and that he's well. I don't believe that we'd have been relegated last season at all.
Sure, no, I agree.
And I think that the ownership did make a mistake in bringing Wayne Rooney. I think they rectified that mistake tenfold by appointing Mowbray. And again, I would just say that because I hope that there are fans of other EFL clubs and League One clubs that are watching this, that there will always be members of the fan base that are, who are very arrogant and probably don't understand everything, and a lot of it probably is a little bit of banter as well. But there is the feeling amongst the fan base is that we are very optimistic, that we are in a good position off the club. Despite what other people might think of the ownership group, I think it is an excellent ownership group that will provide all of the resources that they possibly can to give Davis and the team the best opportunity of getting out of the league. It isn't arrogance that we think that the expectation is that we should finish in the top two and be promoted back.
I think that's valid. I don't think that's arrogant. I think that's just realistic.
There are we will have a budget that will dwarf most other teams as well. Yes, the thing that gets thrown back every time is big club coming down to the third tier. We've heard this all before from fans of X, Y, and Z. But I think if you actually kind of
like Sunderland, like for instance, when Sunderland came down, it's absolutely incomparable. Like the quality of the quality of our squad versus the quality Sunderland had when they were coming down, or Sheffield United when they came. It's just not the same.
Numerous examples of big clubs that have come down, and they're just the difference off the field. And I'm trying to think of. I can't think of an example of a club that have dropped from the second tier into the third tier that I think is most like our situation. The one that I kind of think of a little bit is when Burnley were relegated from the Premier League back into the Championship, and Vincent Kompany came in, and it was a complete overhaul in the playing style. New ownership group had gone in there as well, and as Ryan said, that he thinks, at some point there'll be a little bit blip in the season. Burnley started a little bit slow in that championship season and didn't really get going until
the thing is,
through.
Burnley kind of recruited their squad that summer, whereas we've actually already got some really good top-end League One players, and probably top half championship players in the right circumstances already there, plus a £20 million budget. So I agree. I think I completely agree with both of you. I think top two should be the expectation. I think if I'm just going to add a little doubt, it would be in the statements at the end of the season, Gary Cook apologised for the relegation and took accountability, which I think I appreciated as a fan. Tom Wagner didn't, which is kind of where I have a little bit of a red flag, a little bit that he's a bit sort of more marketing focused than actually building a real connection with the fan base. So there's part of me that doesn't love that necessarily, but I kind of... ultimately it's about the actions, and the actions are he's invested in the infrastructure, he's investing in the team, and so for now I think
he's just a winner. I think he's just so driven by success that he almost just doesn't want to acknowledge the failure necessarily,
which is a double-edged sword, Ben.
Pardon?
Which is a double-edged sword.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. But I think that's just in his nature, and what we've seen from him so far is that he almost doesn't want to acknowledge failure, albeit, he did kind of hold his hands up and say, yeah, we made a mistake by sacking John Eustace. That was nice to see a little bit of humility and a little bit of accountability from him on that front. Ryan, you should talk about
leadership. If we're talking about leadership, Wagner did show his face as much as possible towards the end of the season. He changed the pricing structure to bring as many fans in as possible to support the team. Like, he did everything he possibly could to try and get us over the line when, we were in a bad situation towards the end of the season. Of all the people you might fault for our relegation, I think Wagner is, probably amongst the least culpable, but in terms of those at the top of the club, he has put everything in place and now leaves us in a position whereby, despite last season, despite the errors that were made, which weren't necessarily all on him, they were, club decisions, football personnel decisions as well, which Wagner isn't. He's put us in a position now where, like I say, we get relegated and we come into this season with a massive wave of positivity, and hopefully, that winning nature of his comes to fruition, and that culture, his nature, is represented with the football.
Yeah, I mean, I do have certain doubts or certain things that I don't necessarily love, but at the same time, the way modern football evolves, marketing and commercially savvy people who, that's kind of who tend to do the better in this version of football. So I can kind of live with it. As parts I don't necessarily love, but I guess I appreciate that he's investing in the infrastructure, he's investing in the squad, and he's actions speak louder than words, I suppose. So I can kind of live with it, if you like, especially after what's gone before. So
we knew it was going to go this way when Gary Cook got involved in what.
Yeah. So final question from me to both of you. Too early for a prediction, but give me a number between 1 and 10 to denote your level of optimism for that our ambitions will be realised next season. Start with you, Ryan.
I feel like I have to say 10. I know I have concerns about how much work has to be done this summer, but I want to go into a season excited. I want to go into a season believing we're going to match our ambitions and we are going to do something. I want to believe that we've made the right appointment, that we've got a strong squad, that we're going to recruit, decent players, good characters. I'm throwing 10. We're going to win the league.
10. You had it here
first. I want to believe that. I want to get behind that. So that's what I'm running with.
Ryan's going all out there. What are you saying, Ben?
I'll drop in slightly behind a 9. Genuine optimism. I really think that we can. As Ryan said, I think there's a lot that there's a lot that needs to happen between now and the start of the season and come the end of the transfer window. There is a lot, but I have a 90% confidence level that the club will deliver that.
Okay.
Which is why I'm at a 9 out of 10.
I'll probably agree with you at a 9, Ben. I'm not feeling quite as bullish as Rye, but I'll go to a 9. I think the quality of our squad is pretty convincing. Listen, gents, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you joining us. It's been great to get your insight to talk about Blues. Go follow Ben at Blues_breakdown. Some excellent data and analysis. Go follow Ryan at Ryan Deeney 2194 and also at NL Musings for National League Insight as well. This has been the EFL Debate Summer Deep Dive. Get yourself subscribed, get your comments in, tell us how you think Blues are going to get on, and we'll see you again very soon.
Gab, just before you go.
Sorry.
Just before